and that might sound shocking.
It does sound very shocking.
Every senior member of our cabinet, and actually I think pretty much every senior Labour politician, certainly over the last 25 years, have been members of the Fabian Society. And for those who don't know, the Fabian Society is a secretive organisation who believe in communism through evolution, not revolution. Their logo is a wolf in sheep's clothing.
That says it all.
That says a lot. And then when you look at the UK, what's happening and what's happened, certainly in the last 25 years, if you look at it through a Marxist or a communist lens, things start to come into focus of what's actually happening. And going away from the investment world, you look at the deliberate destruction of families, the deliberate destruction of religion. These are all communist tactics, if you like, because under a communist regime, the only thing that matters is the state. The state provides, the state is all. And you start to sort of join the dots on this, and you think, okay, this is what we're up against.
This is truly what we're up against. And one of the things this morning, we're not talking about socialism the way it's usually discussed, because this is not about protest slogans or government ownership announced from a podium. This is what you got to understand about Fabian Socialism. This conversation is about an ideology that does not shout. It doesn't run for office, folks. It doesn't even need your permission. Simply, it governs quietly. Fabian Socialism was never meant to shock the public. It was designed to guide it. It was born in elite intellectual circles in Britain. This Fabian movement rejected revolution in favor of patience. I know this because when I served as a state representative in the state of Illinois, you have people who were introducing bills for the last 10 years, and each time their vote totals grew. They knew what they were doing. This is why I always say don't never give an inch, because they'll take a country mile. But its architects believed society could be reshaped not through force, but through administration, regulation, education, and the slow transfer of authority away from voters and into permanent institutions. Our guest today understands this system is not just an idea, but as a structure. Wayne Morrow is the CEO of the John Birch Society, one of the longest-standing organizations dedicated to constitutional education and limited government in the United States. Under his leadership, the society has reorganized and trained its staff to become more effective educators and influencers within the freedom movement, both nationally and internationally. Before leading the John Birch Society, Wayne spent decades in senior executive roles with Fortune 500 healthcare organizations. So he's seen this, guys. So today we're going to connect history to reality. We're going to trace how Fabian ideas moved from London Parlors into American institutions and how they embedded themselves into the administrative state. You have to understand, this is the fight that President Trump is up against right now. He's the first president willing to tackle it and face it head on. Wayne Morrow, welcome back to the Joyce Morning Answer.
Hey, good morning, John. John, I think it's very interesting. You're right. The Fabians moved by evolution, not revolution, very quietly behind the scenes. Absolutely. So, yeah, thank you for that intro. You know, we have a book called The Fabian Freeway, written by a lady named Rose Martin. We did that book probably in the late 60s, early 70s, and we just republished it. It's been on my tick list to do because I lived in England and I watched socialism firsthand. Matter of fact, I lived abroad for 4 years, and I saw communism, socialism firsthand. But the Fabian Freeway, it's a chunker. It's over 600 pages or so, but it's available. It's very inexpensive at our bookstore, jbs.org. It talks about the genesis of the Fabians. And that goes all the way back to Cecil Rhodes and Lord Milner, all the way back then. And they got together, and basically you covered that, of the elitists determine how best to look at society. And I may have said this before, but I'll repeat it for your audiences. You know, I lived in Oxfordshire, which is close to Oxford University, and there was Lord Milner was certainly in that area, as well as Cecil Rhodes. But, you know, there was a young man who was listening to the philosophies of the Fabians. And this man took a lot of notes down and conversations from folks that were members of the Fabian Society. And he listened to how they were forming, as you mentioned, shaping society in their view. Bertrand Russell certainly one, and Beatrice Webb. And these people in the back were socialists. And he was so intrigued by what he heard to say H.G. Wells, for example, that he wrote a book. And he said, I can't use my name, but I use a pen name. His name was Eric Blair, by the way. And he says, I'll give him my name. My son's name is George, and I have a town nearby near Orwell. So my pen name would be George Orwell. Wow. And if you read George Orwell, it talks about Big Brother, right? And it is an interesting story about it. People always ask, why is it 1984? And that's because the Fabians formed this organization in 1884 in January, and they said within 100 years they'd have world government. Wow. So that's why the book in 1984, it's not a random year, folks. It was done on purpose. So when you read 1984 now, you can see the vision of the Fabians and look at it today.
Yeah. Now, Wayne, here's the problem. There's a lot of Americans, they feel something is wrong, but they can't put a name to it. How does Fabian socialism explain the reality that no matter who voters elect, the policy outcomes often remain unchanged?
Yeah, good question. What happens, let's talk about the Fabians for a second, because it morphed into the United States. So what happens is that they put people who are their organization in public office quietly, and they direct the policy and legislation to give them the socialist platform. You mentioned that. Look at the UK. It's being destroyed on purpose. It's all part of the plan, by the way. Destroy the culture, destroy everything, and rebuild it back up in a worldview. So when the Chatham House, or the Royal Institute of Economics, was formed, International Affairs, rather, was formed in England, they got together way back when Woodrow Wilson was president, and they formed the Council on Foreign Relations. And the Council on Foreign Relations in the United States. And that organization was in New York City. David Rockefeller was certainly all part of that. And they said, look, we'll work together and reformat the world, called the Council on Foreign Relations. They founded it in 1921. And these people worked together. At the Labour Party, like in the UK, most of all the prime ministers of the Labour Party were Fabians. What that's all about. Look at the United States. Yeah, John, and the mayor of London, it's right on cue, right? Yeah. And, but they don't admit, say, I'm a Fabian, I'm going to destroy your country. Just like the CFR in the United States, Johnny. They are here in the U.S. As of today, even in the Trump administration, they're forming policies, overseeing every president involved, and some are members of the Council on Foreign Relations, looking at the worldview, a world government. We call it a conspiracy. It's not a theory. It's for real. A lot of information's come out. People write about it. They said, this is how it works. This is what we're going to do. And they said, you guys are crazy. But a conspirator, his first rule is to deny its existence. So when you expose it, no, you're okay. So now there's so much written, so much now history has passed. We've been talking about this since 1958. Now we're seeing all the dots connected. People go, wow. Now here's the thing you mentioned, which is because we're spending our time in England as well as the United States. And this is a real opportunity because people are waking up to it. We're connecting dots for them. We're the top of the puzzle box. And they're going, we knew something was wrong, but we didn't know what it was because it was very quietly behind the scenes. And now people waking up to this, especially when COVID hit, because they watched the impact of world government. And they said, this is unintended consequences. People don't want to lose their freedoms. So I see a resurgence of knowledge and awakening because our founders said when they think they're winning, they're going to run naked through the streets, which means here we are, you can't do anything about it. And I see it's a real awakening in the world, not just in the United States.
Now, Wayne, as I think about this, I think about the NGOs. I think about how they crept into our education system, how they crept into our healthcare system. Would you say that the thinking of Fabians is slow expansion, technical language, process over persuasion, and then they always look for power that survives elections, and I always see it that this is not socialism by decree. It is socialism by procedure. So talk to the audience and give an example of how they're able to detect this Fabian socialism way when they see it.
Okay, well, a good one in the UK is we call it the invasion of immigration. That's That's a perfect example. I mean, you go, and I used to live and work in UK, go to London. You can't go there. I mean, it's violent now. I mean, children being taken off the street. So looking at it, they said, what's really going on here? And, you know, if they say anything against what's going on, they call it Islamophobia. They put you in jail. Can you imagine a policeman banging on your door, taking it away? So they're watching their ability of freedom of speech disintegrating on purpose. So that alone has awakened a lot of Brits up, you know, like in the United States as well. They're losing the country. So now that they see it's falling apart, they're saying this can't be all dumb politicians. This is all done by design. And Fabians exist in large corporations and government offices throughout England as well as the United States, and they're all singing the same tune. And so as I have podcasting, I do live presentations in London. I did it last week. They are starting to understand, hey, what's going on with this Fabian program? Now I'm seeing the dots connected. So here's what I see. They don't understand really what happened historically. So now we're connecting the dots, and now it becomes very clear, just like in the U.S., is that it's saying this is not done by accident. It's all done to plan.
Yeah. Now, how important is language as an infrastructure for Fabian socialism? Because, you know, I'll give you an example. The way they substitute words like equity for equality and how those function as policy before legislation ever occurs. I've always said that it's the monopolization of language. And anytime you see the change of language, abortion, you know, stuff like that, how important is their dominance of language in this slow, long march to victory for them?
Well, it's important because it's deception. You know, you talk about equitability and fairness because, you know, they think anybody who's successful in business is really the oppressor, okay, versus the oppressed. They talk about that. It's Marxism, right? And the oppressor is someone who's successful in business. I mean, you may be successful in business, Johnny. Does that mean that you're an evil person? No. Yeah. But large corporations work as an oppressor on purpose because they put their people in those positions to oppress people, and they think anybody in the free market economics world is bad. But they use those terms to cover up their agenda, and they give it. And it starts in the universities and in school. And, you know, you look at recent election in New York City, socialism is good. No, it's not. It's a slow walk to communism, which is a slow walk to slavery.
Yeah.
There's nothing free. Margaret Thatcher says socialism works until you run out of people's money. It doesn't work. It never has. I lived in those countries. They're suppressed. They're depressed. They have nothing. And they take all the ingenuity and freedom thoughts out of their mind because they have to be slaves to the system because they're elitist. They want to run the rule. It's not about money, folks. It's about power. They want to know who lives and who dies. They want to set the rules. It's a spiritual battle all day long. They want to play God, and they want to be that place, and they don't like the current system. That's the bottom line. They want to be God.
Well, I want you to hear what George Bernard Shaw had to say about this.
I object to all punishment whatsoever. I don't want to punish anybody. But there are an extraordinary number of people whom I want to kill. Not in any unkind or personal spirit, but it must be evident to all of you. You must all know half a dozen people at least who are no use in this world, who are more trouble than they are worth. And I think it would be a good thing to make everybody come before a properly appointed board, just as he might come before the income tax commissioners, and say every 5 years or every 7 years, just put him there and say, sir or madam, now will you be kind enough to justify your existence? If you can't justify your existence, if you're not pulling your weight in the social vote, if you're not producing as much as you consume, or perhaps a little more, then clearly we cannot use the big organization of our society for the purpose of keeping you alive, because your life does not benefit us, and it can't be a very much...
Your life does not benefit us. George Bernard Shaw,
exactly
was he part of that society?
Well, he's one of the founding members. Him and Sidney and Beatrice Webb. You're laughing because in my notes, I say we wrote about this. he was all about euthanasia. Can you imagine? He wanted to make sure that you really worthwhile of existence. Like I said, they wanted to play God, right? You really don't deserve to live based on our pro forma. This is so. If I came out publicly today and says, by the way, every 5 years you guys are going to come to a board, which way we control, you have to justify we should exist or not. And this is a good deal. You want to sign up? They can't say that, right?
Right.
But they believe this. So as we uncover this, Johnny, and people, that's a good clip, is that people go, really? Yeah, he did believe that. Yeah, H.G. Wells, Virtue Wells, all those folks believed in this. So what would be in their thinking? Because, again, it's a spiritual battle. They felt they were elitists. They thought they knew better, and they didn't think you deserved to be here. And they did that with COVID. Their part of their plan is destroying. We had the Georgia Guidestones, which is now down, but it said only 500 some odd million people are going to be left on the earth. That's a lot of dead people, right? But who determines who stays and who goes? So they're very blatant about it, folks. They're very blatant about it.
And you know what, Wayne, that's one of the, and I'm not trying to make this a Democrat-Republican issue, but that's one of the reasons why I left the left, because they still espouse this belief that, it's you don't know better. You black people don't know how to use computers. We have to do everything for you. We have to ensure that you have a savings account at the end of your life because you're too dumb and too stupid to do it yourself. I mean, where has the left and those who are on the progressive side, where have they changed in their thought pattern that's separate from the Fabian socialism? They still believe in this system that says you can't do for yourself. We know better, right?
Yep, absolutely right. Well, as I said, the Council of Foreign Relations and of Fabians, these elitists all work together and all come to the United Nations and world government. You're exactly right. And it's not just by color, it's people in general. And they pit people against people. They're doing the dirty work, but they're laughing because remember, they want to reduce the population. So it's tan versus white versus black. They don't really care because, they're amoral, not immoral. They have no morality. As you know, in China, they killed over 100 million people. They don't really care. It's totally irrelevant because, remember, they're elitists. Only a certain part of people will survive. And you're exactly right. So people wake up and they say, look, this isn't about religion or culture or race. This is about their game. And they're trying to have us destroy ourselves because they're going to be on the top of the pyramid. Always the case. Remember, it's a spiritual battle. That's the genesis of it all. And that's what is evil to the core.
Wayne Morrow, why is Fabian socialism so hard to fight? I know you guys at the John Birch Society, you guys long emphasized education over protest. How does that strategy directly counter Fabian tactics?
Well, Mr. Waltz says it's all about education. I think once you know the enemy in the game, that think about it. Once we expose them, they hate exposure. There's more of us than them. So why would you elect someone who promotes Fabianism in your legislation, in a civil society? That's why they do it quietly. And we do it in the United States. How do you elect constitutional-minded representatives? It's not like you don't do anything one morning, and Johnny shows up as our representative, and magically he's our representative. So what happens, people have to get involved. They have to know who they are and protect what God has given us. And they can't sit back and not participate. That's the game. So they put you to sleep, and they spend time on sports and music. There's nothing wrong with that. But they know more about sports scores than about their own country. So they don't teach Americanism anymore. They don't teach about the Constitution. UK, same idea. They just, they're reactionary. And so we bring back to them the history of their country and their law and have good representatives. And that's how you make a change. That's their educational route to go. Not by violence, because they want that to happen, Johnny. Because if you and I start marching through the street, you know what they do? You fall into their playbook, military rule. That's exactly what they want. They want you to be violent and crazy, say, see, you guys can't play nice. So now we're going to have the military oversee every step you get. You can't leave your house because we can't trust you. That's exactly what they say. They set you up to this. So we say, no, we're not going to fall for this game. We have to have constitutional-minded representatives, no matter where you live, that represent the will of the people. I'm saying to folks, you got to wake up. You want freedom. You have to participate in the process. You have to be knowledgeable. and know who your enemy really is.
Yes.
Not the guy down the street. Your neighbor is not your enemy. They're your friends. You got to get together and have good form of government. And you have to participate, Johnny. It's not in the bleachers program. You got to come down the playing field. Yep, you're going to get little grass stains on your clothes, but you got to get down the playing field now. Yeah?
You know, we got about a minute left, Wayne. And when you think about how they've gone about doing this quietly, that's how we've gotten the rise of the Mandanis, the Squad, the Jasmine Crockett's, right?
Mm-hmm. That's right. Absolutely. It all sounds good, right? Free house, free food, free this, and all of a sudden the Governor Hutchins said, "Oh, that's you can't. That's has to be a state of New York has to approve all this. You can't give this stuff away for free." And I guess he's running around like look for donations, but it all sounds good, And minimum wage. We'll give universal income. We'll take care of you. So when a government feeds you and houses you, they got control you, and they control your thoughts and your mind. That's exactly the game. See, They don't want you to be a free thinker. It's a trap.
Come on.
Nothing's for free. Nothing's for free, brother. Nothing.
Free thinkers.
I'm saying, you want to be a free. The Lord has given us liberty and own property and be a free thinker or thought. And that, again, is spiritual. That's what they want. They control your every movement worldwide, not just the United States, not just the UK.
Where can people find you, Wayne Morrow, CEO of the John Birch Society?
JBS.org, and we have the magazine called the NewAmerican.com, which we have one out in Europe called the New European. So we have a magazine in French. It's out in French. We're going to do German. So next year we're going to go out to the international market. That book called The Freebie Freeway is available on jbs.org. You can pick up a copy. It tells you about the history of the Fabians. And we also have another one called The Shadows of Power. It's about the Council on Foreign Relations. It talks about the two organizations working behind the scenes, giving us what we have today. But you know something? I am totally optimistic because there's more of us than them, and truth prevails over lies. Always.
Amen. Wayne Morrow, thanks for joining us. I really appreciate it. We'll be right back.